Okay, a very good morning to all our dear listeners and viewers. Welcome to yet another edition of ACFIM Talks. And today, which is the 19th Friday of November, we are in a week that Uganda is still mourning what happened to us early in the week when we had two twin bombings. Very unfortunate. We've lost some lives and some people are hospitalized. So it's really a sad week for Uganda. We continue to pray for Uganda, but also to those that are affected. And I also call upon the public to be vigilant and work with the security agencies. And it's important that we manage our security and also be our neighbor's keeper. Once again, my name is Felix Kafuma, the moderator for today's very interesting topic that looks at the executive attack on the democratic institutions. What's the future for the governance in Africa? Before we start and before I introduce my guests, I welcome everybody to be part of this conversation by tuning in to our social media platforms, our YouTube channel, our Twitter handle, and also our Facebook page. And you can follow, they will be flashed on the screen for you to be able to follow. And also be kind enough to go on our YouTube page and hit the like button so that you can get the notifications every time we are live on set. Today, with me, I have two interesting, distinguished guests. They are no stranger to the public eye. I'll start with Dr. Deus Kamunyu, who is a lecturer at Makerere University and the chairman of Makerere University Academic Staff Association. I think many of you relate with him in that office. At least either you've seen him in on your sets, TV sets, when he's fighting for the rights of the academic staff. And he's also the chairperson forum for academic staff of public universities in Uganda. He holds a PhD. His PhD dissertation is focused on how the history of pain and shame, in brackets, difficult heritage, has shaped the image of Uganda. Very interesting area of study, Doctor. You are most welcome to ACFIM Talks.
Thank you very much, and I'm happy to be here.
Great. Also with me, I have Henry Kasacca. We've had Henry Kasacca before on our show, and he joins us again. He is a civil society activist, been in this space for close to 20 years, done a lot of work around political economy analysis, gender mainstreaming, deepening democracy processes, and also leadership training. He has also done so much work around youth programming and engagement, and is the founding program. I think this introduction here, which was given to me, is not the right one. But we've been with Kasacca before, and is the ED for Dialogue and Democracy Training Center. Kasacca, you are most welcome. Once again, thank you for being part of this discussion.
Thank you very much, Felix, for inviting me, and I'm happy to be here. I also want to, I'm happy to join Dr. from Makerere.
Yes. Okay. Let me start this way. For people who are just joining us, and to lay a bit of a background on the area of discussion. You have been, I think, in the second week of November, there were very interesting comments made by the President, His Excellency, when it came out to defend passionately the current Minister of Science and Technology and Innovation, Dr. Musenero, when Parliament chose to, the institution of the Parliament interested itself in conducting an investigation into the way the doctor was managing the 31 billion resource fund meant for COVID vaccine development. And verbatim to quote, the president is on record for having come out passionately to even make a veiled attack, I may say, to those that were investigating, that they better be right, because if they are not right, they will suffer the consequences. And also, we've seen him on a couple of occasions. At some point, he came out to make his feelings and position known on the issue of bail. But the way he brought it out also, it was like a veiled attack on the judiciary. But this is not an isolated case only happening in Uganda. In South Africa, the former head of state, Zuma, on many occasions, was seen making veiled attacks to the judiciary. Also here in our neighborhood in Kenya, we've seen Uhuru Kenyatta making, again, veiled attacks to the judiciary. And I think you remember when they annulled the elections and called for a re-election in Kenya, the strong statements he had about the judiciary in Kenya, and since then they have been sustained. So in our neighborhood, we see again state institutions that are responsible to safeguard democracy are under attack by the executive. When you cross to Zambia as well, I'm just picking a couple of examples to give this context. We've also seen the former head of state, Edgar Lungu, on vehemently attacking, for example, the judiciary, and coming out clearly to make known his displeasure and make either a veiled attacks in the way, or even threats to the work of the judiciary. I think there was a case where he was trying to tamper with the constitution. There were issues around running for another term beyond the constitutional term, two-term limit which he had. So the number of cases that are scattered here and there, but across Africa, where you have the strong executive breathing down the necks of these other institutions that are supposed to safeguard democracy, the likes of the judiciary, the likes of the legislature, and also other institutions that are supposed to promote democracy. And that now sets our discussion from that perspective. We need to have a very good understanding what are the implications of a very strong, outbearing executive on the democratic institutions, and what does this mean overall to the future in terms of the way Africa is governance should be considered. And with that brief setting that I've labored to provide, allow me to ask the first question, and I think I'll start with the doctor. Doctor, help us really understand why especially in Africa, because this is very common in Africa. I've not read so much democracy in other areas, especially like East Asia, probably may compare notes for us. But why is that in Africa we have an overbearing executive that bulldozes other democratic institutions? Why is it very prevalent here in Africa?
I hope you can hear me.
I can hear you, Doctor, please. Thank you.
First of all, your question is, how come it's so prevalent in Africa? And you have a background picking on some presidents who have, in the recent times, been seen attacking the other arms of government. And at some point, I will talk about democratic institutions, but arms of government constitute the fourth democratic institution. The others being the Independent Electoral Commission, the political parties, the pressure group, and then the different arms of government. So under different arms of government, we have the judiciary, we have the legislature, and the executive. So basically, we are talking about the executive attacking all the rest of the partners in the democratic institution framework. But why isolate Africa? Because recently, not far from today, there was also an issue in the UK where the Prime Minister seemed to threaten the judiciary somehow when there was a Brexit kind of scuffle. You may recall, and he seemed to warn a bit. And I want to borrow from that in my assertive submission now, that democracy has always been the responsibility of the people. It's always been about the people. And the people must not be spectators. They're involved in the different arms of government, the legislature, and the other arm of government, the judiciary. There are people there. And one believes that they too love their continent, they too love their countries, they too love their society. It's not the president, and maybe, or the head of state. Maybe one could say that he's surrounded by, or he has the tools at his exposure, like the army, the money, to oppress and suppress the other participants in the arm of government. But it has always been the honesty and the boldness of the people. And so why it's prevalent today is because the people seem to be cowards. Because if these heads of state were attacking and met by a force of the people who understand their rights, who understand that we live in these countries or in this continent on earth only once, and we must live a quality life, I don't think any head of state would attempt it again and again. So I think, to me, it's prevalent because, one, people are weak, just like any peripheral world. People are weak, people are ignorant about their rights. People, even those elites whom we think should defend the weak, maybe could be cadres or could be less responsible, or may not be knowing their role in deepening democracy. So they do not have the boldness and the honesty to push for the people.
Interesting, Doctor. Let me bring in here Henry. Henry, what are your thoughts on a very unique trend to Uganda, to Africa? Doctors just even cast the net wider, bring in the case of the Prime Minister when handling the Brexit, the issues concerning the way the executive is quite overbearing on other arms.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, I want to agree with the doctor that the challenges of civic competence greatly facilitate this kind of political behavior, especially in our countries that are still trying to build democracy from the foundation. We are still in the foundation of building democratic societies. And in such a society, civic competence is a very critical element that can facilitate the consolidation of these democratic institutions. So at the moment, being that we are in a foundation, we also find ourselves, particularly in Africa, that we have just entered a wave of democratization. 20 or 40 years ago, many African constitutions did not reflect the powers they have allocated to different organs. and we have seen a wave of new constitutions being formed and trying to emulate and adapt some democratic principles in the form of the various constitutional arrangements that we set up as Africa. And the biggest challenge we have at the moment is that we have constitutions that prescribe and have enshrined in them some theoretical principles of constitutionalism, of governance. And the challenge now is to practice these principles. And this is where we find our biggest challenge as Africa. That in the course of these challenges and the hurdles we face is how to implement our constitutional arrangements. And in the challenges of implementing our constitutions, we are faced with a very restrictive political space where many of these African leaders have not yet yielded. The culture of democracy has not yet been embedded into their DNA. They have accepted these principles, but they still feel they must have some restrictions that are not provided for in the law. So eventually you'll see that this is also facilitated by having very strong executives. The executive power in Africa, and if you are to use Uganda, is so wide that it has so much implications. That's why when an investigation starts in Parliament and the president makes a comment, everybody goes into self-censorship because they don't know on which side the president will be. So these are the fundamental challenges that we face in the name of attacking these institutions. And it takes us back to the principles of separation of powers. That if we are to build a democracy in Africa, a democracy that will facilitate justice, that will facilitate democracy, that will facilitate political accountability, the different organs of government must operate independently, and they must be permitted to operate within their spheres of influence. It is not to say that they're not going to know what others are doing, but everybody should be able to operate within his sphere of influence to ensure that we can be able to safeguard democracy, to safeguard justice, to safeguard freedom, and to safeguard political accountability. So our biggest challenge that we have now in Africa is that the practice of these constitutional principles is still a very big hurdle. And unless we address ourselves to the challenges of implementing these constitutional frameworks, much of what we have in the legal regime will not be practiced. Today we have a very strong parliament, if you look at our legal framework, but the question is, does this parliament perform its oversight roles as envisaged by the framers of the constitution? We have a judiciary that has often come under attack. And at one point, the judiciary had demonstrated a level of resilience. But is this the trend as we get more judges into the judiciary? Do we see some of these comments continuously undermining this principle of constitutional theory? So I think that overall, the challenge we face and why it is different in Africa compared to Britain. I mean, a country like Britain, the Prime Minister may express his personal frustrations, and it will entirely remain at that level. It will not have any implications if the Prime Minister says something. You remember what happened when people they tried to stop the American Parliament from sitting. I mean, it all stops because the institutions have been grounded, the institutions have been consolidated, and they can still overcome the personal sentiments, which is still a very big challenge in Africa. And not only within political institutions like the parliament and executive, but even the political parties. Today, even the party leaders are big men. Big man syndrome continues to pervade the entire governance system. That even in a political party, to oppose the leader of a political party is unheard of. You are likely to have challenges. So at all levels, this shows that the big man syndrome has not yet been overcome to ensure that the constitutional principles we have put in place can be practiced in our countries. I think I would put it at that for now.
Thank you. I think we have this, we've created gods in positions. They can't be contested, their words are final. And that brings me to this question, Doctor. when do we draw a line between an opinion of the executive head from a subtle directive or a veiled directive to a state institution? When do we call this an opinion and not misconstrue it to be a directive? Because, and I think that's why also the problem is the president may now come out and say, that was my opinion, but when do we safely say that was his opinion without necessarily reading into what that opinion implies?
I think the councils could tell us, because they read the constitution and they do understand these things. I think to some extent the president's word is like law to many, and he holds whatever opinion he holds, but his word, I'm told, I read also, that it's like law, and so. But that's not what really should preoccupy us, because it could be our, for example, in our case, could be our long-serving president. But who knows? My brother here could be the next president. So the issue is with the people. I really see it. Yeah, and this is a whole social discussion that we could have. The people. How do you see leaders? How do we see leaders? And what, for example, in my case, I come from under the democratic institutions. I belong to what we call a pressure group, which is led by unions, interest groups, etc. And that's where I placed myself when you called me. But I lead a group of people, about 3,000 in the whole country, public universities, where one could say they are relatively elite, and they understand their rights, and they have a deep understanding of what a leader must be, the accountability and other things. But still, you see these friends of mine, taking it as if it's up to the leader. It's like they elected you, and it is your responsibility to make or break, and then when you break, they shout. So there is no. The people do not know their responsibility. They elect the president, is the head of state, and I probably think they understand what his role is. And fortunately, these democratic institutions are headed by elite Ugandans, elite African citizens. They have a fair understanding of what a leader should be, how a leader should behave, what they should do, what their role is, and what could constitute the opinion or a lawful order. And to me, the president or the head of state, whether a deport or a dictator or a democrat, is a human being and can be challenged. So the problem is in between there, that those who lead the other democratic institutions or involved or participating, who are likely elites, do not have the boldness to speak for the people, to do it for the people. And so, yes, the president, opinion or law, whatever it is, and I like him sometimes in the case of he has his opinion, he puts in there. It's up to you. If you fear to reprisal, it's up to you. Then he will have his way. If you yap, remember he has always told you, for him he's a soldier. He's used to difficult conditions, difficult situations. So if you yap, he will continue and get his way. And so, according to me, the president or the head of the executive cannot possibly attack And this is why I want to deconstruct what executive attack on democratic institutions. He can only undermine let me change it a bit. He cannot possibly attack. He can possibly undermine democratic institutions. And how? One, he can make, for example, the judiciary malfunction by appointing or recruiting cadres and to make cadre rulings, for example. He can, that's undermining. He can impair political parties by, for example, infiltrating them or denying them funding or sources of funding. He can, for example, also push the legislature, in addition to telling them, please be careful, if you do something wrong, I will deal with you. But we have seen that his word, he never implements his word as he says it, but he goes ahead to do what the Africans cannot bear. Most of us, Erites, went to school, like Nyerere used to tell us, to escape from poverty. And so we are always running away from poverty. No one went to school to liberate his people. Nyerere used to tell us that we went to school to liberate people, to liberate humanity, to liberate the African people, not to escape poverty. And so we have so many Erites who are always trying to run away from poverty. They are also in our parliament. And so it's not far-fetched for me to, for example, say that there's a lot of honorable sell and buyouts. Finally, these members of parliament, try to save their meal at the end of the day. They do not have the boldness to do the job for which they were created in the first place. I must talk about creation. They were created and mentored and paid for by the citizens of Uganda to defend the weak, to defend the poor, to defend the vulnerable. And that's their duty. But the president, if I was also in that position to some extent, I would throw in my word. I would say something. I would call it law opinion. But it's up to the people. And we have rights in 500, for example, in our case, in our parliament, elected by the people, with mandates, paid by the people. And they do not have the boldness. And so the issue of opinion of the executive, the head of state, to me, does not arise. The people must also hold their opinion. Is the opinion for the people? Because that's what democracy is about. Is the opinion for the people? Yeah? Or their opinion, I mean the other Erite groups in these other arms of government. Are their opinions for the people? Or they are looking at one man, this like a priest who is holding bread at the offer, it's called what? This Holy Communion. And so they are fearing that the bread could be broken and given to one and the other one fails to get because of what they stand for or what they believe is right. That's my view. The president has a right to hold an opinion, whatever you call it, law, what, and he has a right also to be angry, especially when he sees that, for example, also the alternative has some cadres also, let's say the judiciary, who are hitting hard on the malfunctioning, policy frameworks, implementation. He's also trying to save himself, so he can attack, he can, whatever you call it, to undermine. But do we have the boldness to stand for the people? That's my problem.
Very, very interesting discussion.
Because here. I feel it also, like many times as a trade association, a staff association, or a union leader, many times I'm pushed. But the issue, the question I always ask myself whenever I'm in this struggle, do I understand the interests of the people? Do I know the business I am in. What can I do at tactical level to defend the interests of the people, but at the same time maintain decorum for the rainy day? But if I choose to work for myself and work for my position and work for my stomach, so the alternative to many in Uganda, and so then beginning to see it as being an executive attack, is that they opt for the stomach. They don't opt for the interests of those who elected them, and then the whole thing malfunctions.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Yeah, yes, a very interesting view. Doctor emphasizes the role and the function of the people in the equation. Now, Henry, let me bring you in here on the issue of handling the directive, whether it's a directive, whether it's an opinion, whatever it is. Do we as a country, let me actually make the scope smaller as a country, because probably you're more familiar with the context of Uganda. Do we have mechanisms in place to safeguard democratic institutions from the undermining, from the attack of the executive?
Well, you see, Felix, it takes us back to the power of the executive. And once the executive has too much power, which includes power to allocate resources, it becomes extremely powerful. I mean, if you try to bring it to just create a scenario at home, if you have 3 children and one is not happy with the other, it will not matter so much. But if the dad is not happy with one of them, it will matter to them, because it may mean no ice cream, no sweets, no nothing. If your kid does not do homework and their brother or sister is not happy that you have not done your homework, it will not matter to them. But if daddy knows that you have not done your homework and he says, today I'm not happy with you, Felix, you didn't do your homework, then you know you are not likely to get any goodies from daddy. So it goes down even to the state, that a very powerful president has a lot of discretionary powers and he can allocate resources the way he pleases. And this is the power we have given him. Nobody will challenge that, because we have given him that power. Now, if he expresses a sentiment that I'm not happy with the way people are proceeding, and everybody is running away from poverty, and chances if he's happy with you, he can make things happen, be it at whatever level. We have seen parliament, we have seen courts of law pleading with the president to give them more money. In the just concluded budget process, the Ministry of Finance was cutting the money of Parliament and the judiciary. By cutting that money, it is trying to contain how far they can move. By underfunding the police force, you are actually preventing the police from performing its constitutional responsibilities. If we are in a country where everybody is running to the president for allocation of money, it becomes difficult for anybody to go and get into his way, because he's likely to I mean, people have moved away from parliament and they want to meet the president directly to allocate money. So the importance of a powerful president and the use of that discretionary power, and the fact that, it goes down, the people at the moment are at a very low level because of lack of civic competence. The people do not know how much power they have in the constitution. I mean, the constitution says all power belongs to the people, and it should be exercised in accordance with the constitution. And whoever will be using that power will be using it on behalf of the people. But the people do not know that they can stand up. The people do not know that whatever is being done is in their interest. And we also have a unique challenge in Africa. We still have a traditional African society where people believe in their leader. Our people in Africa they do not have the idea of questioning a chief. How would you question a chief? How would you question an elder? But the African thing has been left by the African leaders today, because the elders would work in the best interest of the people. When people qualify you to become an elder, you will never make any decision that is against the fundamental principle of the people. Now, here we have leaders who go and they're in for themselves, which means they have even abandoned that fundamental principle of African leadership. Because there is no way I would be home with 1 pint of milk and I choose to take all the milk when my kids are sleeping, because then I would have really abandoned my responsibility as a parent. So even in Africa, where we have limited resources, we must see that the leaders allocate these resources in accordance with the priorities. Now, when leaders do not allocate resources in accordance with the priorities of the common man, then they abandon the principle of leadership. I mean, look at how Parliament has allocated resources. Today we are fundraising for pickups for COVID response. The president was on TV begging people to donate 1 pickup per district. But how much is 1 pickup? And we only have about 150 pickups. How many mini cars does the Ministry of Health have? Over 3,000. Some are even grounded. How many cars does the Ministry of Agriculture have? Parliament, you can buy every parliamentarian a brand new car of 200 million shillings every 5 years. Now, when it goes to the Cancer Institute in Mulago, they are telling you they do not have an instrument that can diagnose particular illnesses. Then we have COVID. That's when we get to realize that the people who cannot afford private health facilities are actually not attended to. So the prioritization of the people becomes very critical. And this is why the opinion of the president on an issue is not a simple opinion like my opinion as Henry. Henry, I may say I don't like this, but it has no implication because I have no power of enforcing it. But if the president tells parliamentarians, go slow on Musenero, if you are wrong, I will come for you. But if you have your evidence, it will be very good. That is a serious caution that is going to call for a lot of self-censorship. Because even the people going against Musenero, we may question their intentions. They may not be doing it for the sake of democracy. They may be doing it because Musenero has got a big budget and perhaps she's eating alone. And you could find that it is another force within the government that is pushing this. So, and you see, the issue of Musenero and the money should not be a Musenero issue. It is a governance issue. Ugandans never voted for Musenero. Ugandans never voted for any minister. Ugandans voted for the president. And he swore to use their money for their benefits. So if he has made a wrong decision and allocated Musenero money, he is the president who should answer. But everybody is trying to pretend that the president is innocent, he's being manipulated, he was lied to. I hardly find it so difficult that people can lie President Museveni in this country. They may not think, you are trying to raise an issue, but you don't want to include the president. Just a couple of years ago, one IGG was telling us, whoever is being accused of corruption runs to State House. Whoever is being accused runs to the president. And when you enter State House or you get presidential protection cover, then you can go away with it. So it is that principle that the people using discretionary powers have to emphasize, that if you are corrupt, regardless of where you are, the law should judge. The law should not go for only those who cannot be protected. Nobody is above the law in the country. And this is what we have in our law. But do we have that in practice? So the people who are extremely hungry cannot even practice democracy. All they need is something to eat. And that's why our Ugandans will celebrate people who have stolen money. You know some cases where ministers were being accused of corruption, and their villages were all standing up and protesting, don't touch our people. When we had General Kaihura taken to court, people stood up and said, you cannot bring Kaihura to court, trying to intimidate the judiciary. So the idea that people are still, we have a patronage system, and that's the biggest challenge that we have. And the patronage is not only from the state. Even our political parties have patronage system. People buy up membership cards for others to just vote for them. So regardless of who you are, if you don't have a big wallet, you can never get a particular position in a political party because the parties are financially down. It's only the big people who can inject their money who can take up positions. So eventually, the monetization of politics, which we have allowed to grow, eats up what we are seeing. So what it may not be an attack for in the sense of the attack, but such an opinion does what Doctor has explained, is undermining that institution. When you undermine the judiciary, when you undermine the police force, when you undermine the investigative organs, when you undermine parliament, you kill public faith in these institutions. And that in the long run undermines the growth of democracy, it undermines freedom, it undermines justice, and it undermines fairness. So I would say that under the current conditions, where people are living on their stomachs, where people are extremely unaware of their rights, unaware of what is due to them, even what they're entitled to may appear like favors. And that kind of situation cannot facilitate a growth of democracy. So these opinions undermine the constitutional principle we have set in place. If you allow parliament to operate in its sphere, regardless of where it ends, don't put conditions that if you do not have the right evidence, otherwise no investigation will take place. And this is where we find ourselves in a big challenge as a country.
Wow. Thank you so much, Henry. Some comments coming through. Someone is asking, can democratic institutions be built under an authoritarian leadership? And then there's another comment that's coming through, that executive attack jeopardizes checks and balances of democratic institutions. Let me come to you, Doctor. It's apparently clear that the conditions, the prevailing circumstances, make it very difficult for other democratic institutions to function. Can you hear me, Doctor? Doctor, can you hear me? Doctor, can you hear me now?
I don't seem to hear you. I don't seem to hear you.
Can you first mute?
You seem to break. I can hear my colleague clearly, but I can't seem to hear you. You seem to.
Okay, and how about now? Am I clearer now?
Can I mute?
First unmute. Okay. I think now I'm clear. Hopefully I'm clear now. And I had a question for you that coming off what Henry has just shared, it's apparently clear that somehow under the prevailing circumstances.
Still I can't hear you. I don't seem to
Henry,
hear you.
can you hear
I don't
me?
know why.
Let me see. Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you, Felix.
Myself, I can't hear I can't hear my
But Doctor, you can hear me?
I can hear you clearly, yes, but I can't hear my.
Okay.
Okay.
I think the host.
How about now?
I can hear you now.
Okay, great, thanks. My question comes off what Henry has just shared, because it's apparently clear that it's a bit very difficult to build to really safeguard democratic institutions from manipulation, from undermining, what you call undermining. But ideally, in the current prevailing circumstances, what should be done? What are the practical remedies for Uganda to start to build, even Africa at large, to start to build a culture of allowing institutions to function with what Henry called within their spheres of influence, and the checks and balances are applied, and the principles of democracy are adhered to? What should be the first steps for us to get there? How do we recover what we seem to have lost along the way?
For heaven's sake, in our case, for example, we still have a government in power, 30 years, that promised good governance. And that to me is very serious. And I hope the president understands the power of that you promised. We have a party that promised this country good governance, stable institutions, to include democratic institutions. I also understand that he has the duty to build forward and to manage the situation, to manage. And that's, I use it carefully, because managing is not leading. Leading is loyalty, that you have acted in the best interest of the people for a long time, and now they are loyal to you. You don't even need to buy them or confuse them. So that if the only option is management of society, then it means leadership has failed. And leadership, in many ways, means that these institutions are dwelling in their mandate and that they are doing everything possible in the best interest of the people. Now, the duty is for the executive, because the executive comes from, in our case, comes from a party in power. And when I go back to the party, I begin to see a group of people, maybe led by ideology, meaning they have a system of beliefs and values on which then they rally society, are working hard to make sure that these institutions on which they are called to govern, on which they are called to and guide, are forming to the expectations of the people, and that they can stand a test of time, and that they can be there even beyond them. And where I could fault the executive, and the executive can be anyone in our case, because I don't want us to think the executive is just President Museveni forever. The executive could be DP, the executive in our case, because we are in multi-party dispensation. And in this case, I would think some fault is with the executive, because the executive and the party in charge has a responsibility of making sure that institutions form, that production systems form. They have a duty to put in place a workable structure that can outlive the party, that can be for the state, that even in their graves, they can thank God for it. And so, like area theories put in place, I would expect a government of the NRM type, which at the beginning, I was a little boy, seemed to understand the importance of a superstructure, for example, where society is guided by a clear ideology that family, communities, education system that feed into these institutions you are talking about are solid enough to guide the nation forward, to build the people and their resilience. It is the responsibility of the executive. And the executive can't be the head of state. It's with the people. I will end it always like that. The people is with the people. And my colleague has said the people are, like I also hold a view, that people are in search for the stomach. And so we are here to confirm that everything is crazy. Because finally the people must check this. It is the people to check this. We cannot always depend on the goodwill or the will of a good man. Never. But the good man, unfortunately, in our case, for example, where a group of people fought all their way into power, promising to build a sustainable state, then the burden still is with them. because they have to, they must account on that note. That, okay, many years after, what is the nature of society? What do you call a family in Uganda? What is the nature of community? What do they think a leader should be like? What is their responsibility in this whole context? I stayed in Senegal some time back. I had a small assignment in Senegal, and I stayed with the people because the work I was doing had involved civic processes like the French usually like. And I liked the people. The people seem to understand what a leader should do at some level. And for all democracies that have survived and have continued to build, the people must understand. And so whose responsibility? The executive has the first responsibility. The civil society has the other responsibility. The parties, because they also seem to be for the stomach. I assume these political parties are built around an ideology, a system of beliefs and values, and that they are down in the people teaching them and creating an alternative. But they also to be chasing a day's meal sometimes, disguised as some kind of politicking, positive politicking. And so the executive has the first, because the government in power, fortunately, it's the government that rallied people for positive change, for a country that can sustain itself. And I would wish them to reflect on that. And a country that can sustain itself must have solid democratic institutions. And the civil society has the responsibility. The political parties have the responsibility. The pressure groups, including my group, we have a responsibility to tell workers their rights and for them to defend the rights of workers and other groups, interest groups. And of course, we already have established judiciary and legislature. They have a portion of them. But remember, the legislature is the house of the people. And so it's actually contradictory for us to be thinking that the legislature is powerless. I don't understand, because they are the representatives of the people. They understand their concerns. You see? So the first fault is with government, the government in power, the party in power, because it has a responsibility on the basis of the theories that we know. Like, for example, one that talks about the superstructure, where we have an idea embedded in our ideology of what family life should be at the end of our tenure, of what education system should be that takes us forward, of what how laws should evolve, and that shapes the production systems, including the formation of democratic institutions.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Our time is fast spent. We have about 5 minutes to get out of here, but that's enough time for one more question that will be bringing us to the close of this live broadcast. And Henry, let me throw this to you. Looking at what Doctor has shared and where does the buck stop, who is held responsible, what is the future of Uganda's democratic institutions? Because we don't seem to see a slowing down in the way the executive influence and power is growing and widening. So what does that mean to the future of Uganda's democracy progression?
Well, I think that Uganda has established a foundation. Uganda has adopted these constitutional principles. They are in the law, and they are not likely to change soon. Okay, we shall have instances where they are being abused, but we understand that the abuse of these constitutional principles, powers, and privileges a temporary arrangement. It also goes down to the lack of a democratic culture. Democracy is not just about legislation. The people must learn to be democratic. It's a culture thing. It requires orientation. It requires being grounded, and it starts from all the way as children grow, as people grow. When kids today are campaigning, when I was in primary school, we never used to vote for prefects. The teachers would appoint prefects depending on your behavior. But today, every school has a campaign, and kids, even in P2, are campaigning. The challenge is some of them are doing wrong campaigns by bringing sweets and bribing people with gifts, which are also facilitated by the parents. But if we can build a democratic culture, and democracy is not something that will grow in 5 years, it's going to be a lot of time to build this culture. I know there are some people who will have to die before becoming democratic, or they will never be democratic because they have never tasted the seed of democracy. But with various generations, Ugandans are believing that it is possible to use democratic means. Even if they believe that the process is not working, they are not ready to abandon that process. So building democracy is a collective effort. We all have a role to play as a country. Whether you are a leader, whether you are a judge, whether you are a policeman, whether you are a civil society, whether you are an individual or just an ordinary Ugandan, you have a role to play in building our democracy. So all the challenges we have, including lack of civic competence, require a lot of awareness building. We even have civic education in our laws as a country as part of building democracy. But this has not been performed because of budgetary constraints. So I would end by saying that the future of democracy in Africa and in Uganda is unstoppable. It may just take long, but we can never get back to a dictatorship. Those days are gone. If you can see so many people coming up to vote, even if their votes are cheated, the mere fact that they are coming up to vote is a sign that we are getting more democratic. So it's a cultural issue which may not happen soon, but the challenges we face should not frustrate us. If you have supported Ugandan political parties and they have not delivered, please don't abandon them thinking parties cannot deliver. If it is a process, if you have supported parliament and parliament is not delivering to expectations, don't abandon parliament and then say parliament can't deliver. We need democracy is not about time frames that we must have this coming up next time. Otherwise, we may lose all the opportunities of building a democracy. I end by saying that building democracy is a collective effort, and we can only do it through collaborative actions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I have less than a minute to bring this to a close. I'll give Dr. 30 seconds for the parting shots.
It has always been up to the people. It's the people, and the people must never be frustrated. The people must build on. The people must find ways. The people must discuss like we are doing. The people must get action points. It's about the people. That's the only way we will resist dictators or possible dictators in our midst, or even push against the global political economy. Before, it was a struggle against the colonialists. Today is a struggle against our brothers and sisters in the armies, in positions of responsibility, to honor the people's call. So build civic competence, do everything that my brother has said, empower the people. It's not a one-day job, but we must progress. I thank you.
Thank you so much. A journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step, and that's what we are doing here. Thank you so much. That was Dr. Deus Kamunyu, who is a lecturer with Makerere University and is the chairman of MUASA. Many of you can relate with him at that front. He's also the chairperson Forum for Academic Staff of Public Universities in Uganda. And I was also joined by Henry Kasacca. Again, it's good to have you, who is the Executive Director at Dialogue and Democracy Training Center. We've been discussing executive attack on democratic institutions, and your host today was Felix Kafuma. I wish you a great, great week ahead. Stay safe. Be your neighbor's keeper. God bless, and bye-bye.
Good night.
The monster of money politics is eating up Uganda's democracy. When you take money from a candidate, it means you are feeding the monster. Then you become a part of the problem. When a candidate who overspends on campaigns is elected, he or she will not represent voters but himself. He or she will engage in corruption to recover campaign money. Social services will not be delivered and the voter will suffer more. Voter, let's be wise. Give democracy a chance. Do not sell your vote. Focus on the issue.